On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, welcome back to Season 2 of JLF's Brave New World. Our magazine partner for this series is The Week, Journalism with a Human Touch. Our first session is The Majesties, Tiffany Tsao in conversation with Manasi Subramaniam. What dark and haunting secrets lie intertwined with the majesty of family empires, and what terrible betrayals can bring them crashing down? Tiffany Tsao brings to life the tragedy of two Chinese Indonesian sisters, one lost in a coma as the sole survivor of the other's attempt to poison the entire dynasty. In conversation with Manasi Subramaniam, executive editor at Penguin India, Tsao takes us through the extraordinary tale of treachery and betrayal. Tiffany Tsao is a writer and literary translator, and she's the author of the novel The Majesties and the Outfit Fantasy series. Her translations from Bahasa Indonesia to English include Norman Erickson's Pasaribu Sergius Seeks Bacchus and D. Lesterari's Paper Boats. Manasi Subramaniam is executive editor and head of literary rights at Penguin Random House, India. Do remember that all our sessions are available to view on our Facebook page, JLF LitFest, and on our YouTube channel, Jaipur LitFest JLF. In case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our YouTube channel, Jaipur LitFest JLF. Ladies and gentlemen, the Majesties, Tiffany Tsao in conversation with Manasi Subramaniam.
Thank you, Sanjoy, for that lovely introduction. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back again on JLF Brave New World. And I'm really excited to be talking to Tiffany Tsao, the author of The Majesties. We're going to be talking about this novel and quite a bit about some of the tensions that the novel explores. The Majesties is an extraordinary blending of multiple genres. It's a crime thriller, it's also domestic noir, it's also a family drama. There's so much going on in this novel. And so I thought that the best way to introduce everyone to this extraordinary plot would be by asking Tiffany to read out the opening paragraph of the novel, which kind of just grabs you and takes you straight into the middle of the plot. So over to you, Tiffany.
Okay. Thanks, Manasi. Okay, so this is the opening paragraph of The Majesties. This is the Pushkin Press edition that just came out in the UK. When your sister murders 300 people, you can't help but wonder why, especially if you were one of the intended victims. Though I do forgive her, if you can believe it. I tried my best to deny the strength of family ties when everyone was still alive. But now I realize the truth of the cliche. Blood does run thick, even if poison trumps all. Oh.
What an opening, Tiffany. Like, honestly, I was kind of grabbed by the neck and taken right into the middle of the plot. So you have to tell us where that image comes from, that first startling image of a woman talking about her sister having murdered 300 members of her family by poisoning them. You'll find readers will find out very soon that this takes place at a grand birthday celebration of the family patriarch. And this young woman, Estella, poisons 300 members of the entire clan. Where does that startling opening image come from?
So actually, it comes a lot from the whole structure of the novel as I envisioned it. So I'm, as what do they call it? You're either a pantser or a plotter. You fly by the seat of your pants, or you plot meticulously, and I tend to plot meticulously. And so when I was writing the notes for the novel, structure was very important for me. And it's a novel about basically excavating and continuing to find really horrible things. So one horrible secret being unearthed after another. And this woman's journey uncovering those secrets. And so I thought to myself, well, what would be the most horrible thing at the end? What would all this lead to? And then maybe I should start from that and then sort of work backwards to see what all of the other horrible things were that led up to it. So it's structural, really. And I remember I was outlining it at a literary festival in Singapore, actually, the Singapore Writers Festival. I was in the audience for a panel, and that's usually when you get really excited because everyone's talking about writing. And so just sort of, I think during a Q&A session, I zoned out and was writing notes. And I think all of a sudden I just thought, what happened, maybe because I was around a lot of people, why not start with a mass murder? So that's the story behind that.
So there you have it. It starts with a mass murder. But like I said earlier, I would be hesitant to just call it a crime thriller, because it's not really a whodunit in the traditional crime sense. It's actually a why did this person do it? Because you know from the first sentence who did it. So Tiffany, tell us about what genre would you ascribe to this book? Because I can't decide. Sometimes I think it's crime, sometimes I think it's family drama, and as I said, domestic noir. There's so much going on. What would you call it?
Yeah, I actually have that trouble too, and I tend to have this trouble because so the first two novels I wrote were actually I think they've been billed as fantasy, but for a while they were literary fantasy. And I actually had trouble finding an agent for everyone. Manasi and I have a mutual friend in my agent, Jayapriya Vasudevan. But she, like, because the first novel I wrote was very genre bendy, and I think maybe that's a problem. I don't tend to think in terms of genre. I'm really bad, apparently, at thinking in terms of genre. So apparently all of the books I write, including the Majesties, come out as just sort of a blend of things. I think just because I'm more compelled by, I don't know, like certain issues and certain images, and I think I tend to just fuse them together for better or for worse. Yeah.
No, but that's exciting, because I'm all for destroying labels altogether and just reading a book for exactly what it is. I also wanted to talk about the background that your novel is set in. So, I mean, it takes place largely in Indonesia, although quite a bit of it takes place in other parts of the world. It's also set in quite a specific background of multiple kinds of tension. We have there is a story that takes us through the racial inequality within the country. There's a very clear strand of economic inequality. And thirdly, we have quite a bit about gender inequality. Can you walk us through the background of this, both in terms of what you think the real context is, as well as how they play out in your novel?
Okay, that's a really good question. So apologies in advance if my answer is, I guess, insufficient to the question. But in terms of racial inequality, this novel I wanted to set in just drawing on my Chinese Indonesian heritage, and that was something that I had been coming to terms with throughout my 20s and into my 30s, and that was something that I think that I had never been sure about how to write, how to tell. It's not really there aren't that many fiction examples you can point to, especially in English in particular, and I felt like it was almost, I wanted to write about it, but I also knew that it would be quite daunting because it would be breaking new ground. And I wanted to write specifically in the world that I think my family grew up, moved in, the circles my family moved in, which is like sort of the wealthy Chinese Indonesian sphere. But at the same time, I was also very acutely conscious of the fact that within Indonesia, even though there are a few Chinese families who are extremely wealthy, that also, that it takes place in the context, in the framework of like a long history of state-sanctioned racial discrimination against the Chinese. So that was something I really wanted to work into the novel as well, because I felt it would be irresponsible to, just portray like wealthy Chinese Indonesians without the background of the systemic discrimination they faced for a while, ethnically speaking. So that's one answer, I guess. Then let's move on to the next layer, which is wealth, I guess economic inequality. And I guess I was just, I really wanted to grapple with the issue of, wealth and morality. I think, it's, I didn't read Crazy Rich Asians actually while writing the book, because I was actually, part of me was worried maybe if I read it, then I'd be influenced by Crazy Rich Asians, so then I didn't read Crazy Rich Asians. But then I read it afterwards, and I was like, oh, they're really, they're very different books, because one is, I think it's more lighthearted, right? Wealth is not necessarily a sinister thing. And then I think in this book I wanted to just explore more, right, the excesses that come with wealth, and the and the problems that it can create. And yet at the same time, in the novel, right, if we're talking about the interplay between racial inequality and economic inequality, right, wealth enables these characters, and there are mentions in the book throughout of how wealth has enabled them to sort of escape the consequences of the fact that there is discrimination against the Chinese in Indonesia, right? So in a way that, right, in this society, there's a perverse incentive to amass wealth, partly because it's mentioned in the novel, right? The Chinese are actually excluded from participation in the political sphere, participation in the in the bureaucratic sphere, in the novel, and during Suharto's era. So actually, one of the only routes that was available, that has been available for a long time for Chinese Indonesians is, the trader, the merchant, the entrepreneur, right? And this solidifies stereotypes, right? So even though the stereotype, if you do it well, can become a haven, it also is, further perpetuates the stereotype. The last, gender inequality is, I think was that correct? Yeah. So yeah, I guess the novel has a lot about domestic abuse in it, and very specifically like a certain type of psychological abuse, and a lot of it does have to do with me thinking through the different expectations for women as opposed to men, and particularly this particular one actually grew out of a character of who is based sort of on a friend of a friend boyfriend. So a friend of my friend told me about her friend's boyfriend, and it was just this little snippet. But I sort of I was telling someone I sort of treat characters like plant cuttings. I snipped a bit off, and then I put it in water and let it grow. And from that, the monstrous character of Leonard, who's the primary abuser in the novel, grew out of that. Yeah, but I think it's a bit hard also in the novel, right? Because you have one family which in which women are allowed to participate in the economic sphere, and then you have another family who forbids women from participating in the economic sphere, and that actually proves quite debilitating, right? So it does matter a lot whether women can or cannot participate in the economic sphere, make money, get power, economic power for themselves. Yeah.
So I want to go back to one of the things you just said, which is you use the word wealth when we talk about economic inequality, and I think that is exactly the word I would kind of hone in on as well, because wealth and power are so closely interlinked. And I think one of the things that you show us through the novel is that what is also interlinked with wealth and power is a kind of moral depravity or moral corruption. And it's almost impossible for us to be able to extricate capitalism from corruption. And I wondered what you thought about that. Do you think that there is a way forward for capitalism that is not destructive?
Insofar as I am able to currently think of things, I think it's very hard. I don't think in the way that we've seen it now, and the way in the form we have it now. I mean, yeah. Sorry, I guess. Not. Yeah, and then yeah, I think there is something to yeah, elements of I guess social socialism, social welfare, right? Yeah, I guess my simple answer might be no, but yes, that's actually a bit hard. Weirdly, it is hard for me to say because yeah, because capitalism nursed me. Like I grew up in a childhood where basically my family is very capitalist, and I think that's the reason why like I've benefited from that, right? So I think that's very hard as well, right? To say that out loud. No, maybe not. Okay, yeah.
So, I mean, I think also you're saying that the personal and the political are very, very closely interlinked to the extent that the way power plays out both within the family and outside. And so we talked about like the external tensions within the novel, but those are all like quite external tensions that that play overtly into the novel. Whereas the novel itself is about the domestic sphere. It is about family. It is about, both the sort of insidiousness of family as well as some of the structural support of family. So I also wondered how much for you the domestic sphere was reflective of the outside sphere. Like, did you also think that this family is a microcosm through which one can view the larger structure?
I think that I wouldn't say necessarily maybe a microcosm, but I would say that they're inextricably linked, right? So what happens on the outside, right? Economically, their economic the families portrayed in the novel, their economic circumstances has a huge effect on what the family members inside are expected to do, what they can do, what they can't do, and how they act. Right. And I think, it's completely intertwined. And I mean, that's a large part of the, sort of the claustrophobia of the novel, right? That there basically is no escape unless, they really move all the way away, which, Estella and Gwendolyn find some respite when they're in Berkeley, California, because they can pretend, right, that all of that doesn't exist. But when they come back, they move back, right? It's, that those layers, all of those layers, right? The domestic, which is fed by the economic, which is fed by also, sort of the racial politics on the outside, all sort of enclose them. Yeah.
So how much of this is actually personal for you? So you just talked about your family and how you grew up. And I would really love to hear more about how much of this is drawn from real life and how you're able to distance yourself from something deep that's clearly deeply personal, and also to be able to create fiction out of it.
Yeah, so this has been hard because even though the novel is set in the same world, a world that I was familiar with growing up, I did not want to, write, I didn't want to just write autobiography, and I didn't want to just write my family. So the characters are all, facets. I was very conscious about fashioning them. And, as for example, I said Leonard was, a friend of a friend's boyfriend. Right. And then, someone else might have, aspects of this one other character or this other person that I know. But I was very extremely conscious of, sort of making that separation. And I think that's partly why the novel can be so relentless at the same time, because I've heard also like some readers have likened it a bit to satire in that respect, right? Because there are some characters that I think there's more mercilessness with in terms of portrayal. But yeah, for the base feelings, I think, and the emotions and sort of the guts of the characters, I think I joke with someone that like actually all my characters are just me, like, everything that I feel, like it might be like magnified or it might be shifted. but it all comes from how I know to feel, but maybe just in a different situation, or consciously altered or moved a bit. For example, the relationship that's very close between Gwendolyn and Estella, right? The closeness of it is based a lot on the closeness between my sister and me, who I've grown very close to. As we've grown, the more we've grown up, actually, we've become closer. So that's just one example, right? And then also, I guess maybe the relationships with okay, sorry, I'll just stop there. Yeah, but
So, please go on, but also tell us a little bit about how you show certain characters quite clearly moving away from this sphere of wealthy family, like the amassment of wealth is particularly connected to the family. And there are ways in which these characters move away. And do you think this book was a way for you to move away from it personally as well?
I think it was a way to make sense of it. Not necessarily move away. I wrote an essay that I think you've read already, called Monsters Made, Not Begotten, and it's for AAWW. And it's a personal essay about, sort of writing the novel, and also, my own background and how that's all fit in. But I think, it's been a way of me making sense of it more, so that I can realize that, they're different. I think maybe my novel and my family, right? In a sense, I think writing the novel enables you to say, okay, so maybe the things that you have thought, or the things that you've harbored within you, they're in this novel now, and it's actually a fictional world. And, realizing that there is that separation, right? Because I'm still very close to my family. Even though I've, made certain decisions about, where to live, how to live, etc. Yeah.
So was it cathartic?
I don't know. Cathartic, I feel like, you're like, woo, so happy. But, I think even after I wrote it, I'm like, is that cathartic? I hope it is. I feel good about it. I feel like really happy about it now, and really, I think so. It just took a little while. I'm one of those people who, like, it takes me a while for the emotion to sink in. And I'm so grateful for my family. They've been so supportive of the book, So that's also been a pleasure. Yeah.
So let's jump back into the fictitious world and talk specifically about Estella's decision to poison her family, which is a reaction to some of the things we've just talked about. Do you think that it was, did you feel that her decision was a kind of justice or retribution? Do you feel that destruction can be the result of trying to escape capitalism?
I actually, personally, as an author, and I realize, like, once I write the book, and it's, it's subject to multiple interpretations, but personally, like, I think the murder is meant to be atrocious, and it is meant to be, as you find out as the book goes on, it is actually wrapped up in self-loathing, right? And so then, by the time you get to the end of the book, there is sort of a genocidal aspect to it and a self-genocidal aspect to it, because Estella is so wrapped up with her family, and she can't get away from her family, right? Multiple times her sister tries to tell her, you need to get away from the family, and she can't get away from the family, and their pathologies are her pathologies. So it ends up being actually, sort of a very harsh way of atonement, a very severe atonement. And I think in the novel, I won't go into many details, right? But in the very, very last scene, right, it's subterranean caves, it's cool, it's dark, right? It's away from the sun. And I think throughout the novel, you'll see that sunlight is portrayed as very almost merciless, right? Dragging everything into the open is portrayed, into the light is portrayed as very harsh. And there is a kindness and a forgiveness in forgiving even the most atrocious of sins, which is, I think, what we sometimes do with family and loved ones in order to keep them, in order to be able to love them, right? So, the murder is actually a very severe way of dealing with it. And in the novel, I feel if you look throughout the novel, what characters really are yearning for is grace and mercy from others, and Estella especially from herself.
Yeah. So I want to jump now from the question of economic inequality to racial inequality, which we sort of got into a little bit. One of the things I also found really fascinating about the layers and layers and layers in your novel is that you talk at length about Indonesia quite specifically, and about the racial tension or ethnic tension around the way this family has amassed wealth. But at the same time, you also provide us this extraordinary perspective when the girls are in Berkeley, and the way that the Chinese community, for example, is stereotyped in within the Western world. Tell me how these two tensions play off against each other for you.
Yeah. So I really did want to, just show how, right, stereotypes, are very regional. Actually, they differ from place to place. And yeah, like I think it was, I think it's very interesting to see like these two different stereotypes, right? One where I guess the Chinese in America as sort of I guess hardworking, thrifty, frugal, model minority, right? Those kinds of stereotypes. And then in Indonesia, right, where the stereotype actually projects them into a position of power, of economic power, which then perversely works to the disadvantage of the Chinese as well. So that I think that was just something that I mean, I don't want to say that it's interesting, right? Because sometimes I think like, what kind of book would I have written for a different audience? Because I write in English, and because I knew that this book would probably be published by a Western publisher. I think I actually was very conscious about saying like, okay, they will come with a very different understanding and stereotype in their mind about ethnic Chinese. So I did want to sort of unpack that a little bit. And I think to myself how it'd be so interesting, because in Indonesia, I don't necessarily need to unpack that. But then it's nice to have the scene in Berkeley and, interacting with like Asian Americans, because then you can also see how stereotypes, compare at home versus, in the States. Yeah, but yeah, I guess, and, the aunt figure, she ends up sort of moving from one stereotype into another to escape. And I won't go into more details about that.
Okay, let's not give too much away, because honestly, the ending it kind of took my breath away. The way a lot of stuff comes together in the end, and then that very sharp reveal at the end, it really took my breath away. So I'm not going to give too much away. Let's talk about the insects. I mean, as you read the novel, readers, you will find that insects play a very integral role in the unraveling of the plot. And the title also, Tiffany will tell you, comes from one particular creature. So tell me about why it is that entomology plays such an extraordinary role in this novel, including in some of the work that that the girls do, and why insects?
Okay, so I'll tell you sort of the embarrassing, sort of childish reason, which is just I love insects. So, actually, I had wanted to, sort of at some point I had wanted to study entomology, and really, so to the point where in graduate school I got a part-time job at a natural history store, just on the strength that they said that they would let me pin the insects because they had these drawers filled with insects. So that's the purely like personal reason, like when you ask a writer, like, why is this thing in there? Is it some deep symbolic meaning? And then they're like, oh no, I just like this. But actually there is a deep symbolic meaning as well. So, I was very drawn to the idea of insects because they're such, I guess just from an evolutionary aspect, I think it's fascinating, right? Especially with the monarchs and with ants, who make a very brief cameo, the ants. But social insects, right, that are actually very, or sorry, not butterflies, but sorry, insects that are very engineered by nature to do and behave in certain ways. And I thought to myself, what better metaphor for just behavior of humans who, even though they try and be autonomous and individual, right, there are all of these social obligations, hardwirings that are built into them and around them. So hence, right, the sisters, right, trying to escape, and then seeing the monarch butterflies, migrating down the west coast. And it's this idea, like this interplay between, oh, you're free and you're flying, but you're also trapped because nature has just trapped you, and little do you know that you're just enacting the same pattern that has been enacted for generations. And similarly for bagatelles, right? The insect jewelry, the living insect jewelry accessories that Gwendolyn comes up with when she founds her fashion house. Right, the idea that they're, I guess, still a product, right? So natural looking, but highly artificial, right? And very much shaped. And also for the bagatelles, very much trapped, right? Because they've been made to be dormant. So they're alive, but just, dormant and beautiful on the outside, but, sort of, one would imagine a living hell on the inside. So it just seemed like naturally that, not only because I like insects and have tried to learn a lot about them, but it seemed like a natural trope for a lot of the things I wanted to convey in my novel.
And the title.
Yes, and the title, The Majesties. So actually, can I tell you the long backstory of the title? Is it okay? Yeah. Okay, so the title, the English title, the title, The Majesties, which is what the US and the UK edition are called, actually was come up with by another person who's his name is Daniel Lazar, but it refers to I guess a particular line of the jewelry, living insect jewelry that is in the novel, and it's a kind of butterfly, so hence the Majesties, right? But also, as I said, it becomes sort of like this trope also for the characters as well, right? Because they are right, majestic on the outside and very beautiful, but yet trapped by a lot of different circumstances, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So
and so the imagery also of wearing insects as accessories, it has a kind of double effect, right? What you see on the outside is something that's clearly beautiful, but on the inside, the insects themselves are trapped into dormancy, as you said. And for me, it was also interesting to, as we hear about the insects, to simultaneously hear about some of these really shocking family secrets that come tumbling out through the course of the novel. Tell me a little bit about the insidious family dynamic that you clearly describe in the novel, and how secrets are kept for the sake of propriety, which is like in order to look majestic on the outside, but keep everything sort of crumbling on the inside.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Like the family, right? It's almost what is it? It's so unbearable to talk about what's actually going on that, yeah, they would rather behave in ways that are like quite harmful and that are not beneficial, rather than sort of face the truth of everything. And that's sort of related, I guess, to what I was saying earlier about the themes of harsh light and then cool dark, right? So judgment and mercy, right? Those two intertwined. But yeah, I mean, because of the secrets in the family are so awful, right? That it's almost like you can, to look upon them, right, and to talk about them would be unbearable, right? And so hence the covering over, right? And that's almost the worst part of the worst part of the novel for the characters, right? Gwendolyn and Estella, who end up, uncovering quite a lot, right? Is when they uncover it, not only the facts, but also what they've covered over in their unconsciousnesses.
Yeah.
That, it's almost too unbearable. And, there's almost a sense of like, oh, you should have just left it as it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit earlier about gender inequality within the structure of these families. And without giving too much away, I also want to talk a little bit about how the character in the novel, who is a survivor, you explore the way in which she creates for herself a rich inner life, and it's a way in which you tell us that because she can't rely on external support, she creates support mechanisms within her own imagination, and that plays out really beautifully in your novel. How did you come to explore this sort of truly complex dynamic of trauma in the novel?
I would like to say that either it's from personal experience or extensive research, but I think maybe it isn't in this case, one of those things where, you experience a little bit of something very small, and then you sort of take it to its logical conclusion. Right. So I haven't experienced any, severe domestic abuse myself. I did not read, I must confess, I did not read up on a lot of accounts to write the novel, but just from, certain moments, certain stories, you think what would be the logical way to go. And I think just for creating the depth of it, right, and the richness of it. Part of it was I knew where I was going, right, for these support systems. I knew where I was going, but also I had to write even from the outset as if the support systems in that fantasy world were real, right? So all of it is real in that sense. And that's the only way I could really do that. And then sort of in subsequent drafts, go back over and, maybe you can sort of get hints or you can, spot clues here and there, but just basically assuming it's reality, because that is what, like if to truly escape into fantasy, you need to really be convinced that the fantasy is a reality.
Yeah. So I think we only have a few minutes left. So I want to ask my last two questions, which are also selfish, because I want you to recommend good other novels that you would suggest to me and to our readers, for those of us who have read the Majesties, to move on into the wide. I know you're a translator yourself, and you've done a fair bit of translation and bringing forward voices into the Western world. So please give us a couple of recommendations, both translations and English language books that you would recommend to us.
Okay, just a few, because I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I'd like to just give a huge list, but I won't. So I'll just mention a few. So The Wandering, which is this really sort of dark, gritty, choose your own adventure novel that came out recently. With Harville Secker in the UK, and it's by Intan Paramedita and translated by Stephen Epstein. So The Wandering, I highly recommend it. It's just so innovative structurally, and it really is sort of a dark take on cosmopolitanism and traveling, and sort of thinking about all of the other things that go into it, right? What happens if economically, how does that affect your ability to travel and wander wherever you want? And also, in terms of race, in terms of all of those things. So as a translator, I would be remiss if I did not mention some books I translated. So Paper Boats by D. Lestari was the very first novel I translated, and I'm very fond of it. And it's a very nice romantic comedy, but you find out also, you learn a lot about working life, office culture, campus culture in Indonesia. I really like those aspects of it. Sergius Seeks Bacchus, which is a poetry collection by Norman Erickson Pasaribu. I translated that in 2019, and it's a book of queer poetry. And it changed my life. It actually really did. So I would really highly recommend that. And then, of course, anything by Pramodia Anantatur. Everyone knows about his, he's an older novelist, now dead, but everyone knows about his Buru novels, especially This Earth of Mankind. But I have recently, in the past 2 years, found out that there's a translation of his book, It's Not All a Night Fair, and that's actually like my favorite one. So yeah, you can read that. And then, can I recommend one more? Is there time?
Yeah, we're out of time, but one more.
Okay, so from now on, everything will be different by Eliza Vitri Handiani, and it's about the euphoria and the youthful euphoria set around sort of the transition from the Suharto dictatorship to afterwards, and then also the letdown of that euphoria. Sorry, that's it. I get too excited when people ask.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful. I know I personally am going to hit you up for more recommendations once I'm done with these. But thank you for talking to us about the Majesties. And thanks so much to Sanjoy and Namita and William and everyone else at JLF for having Tiffany and me here talk about this absolutely wonderful novel.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, this was a really great conversation. Thank you, Manasi, for talking with me.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Mansi, for that fabulous discussion and all the information on the betrayal and the great tragedy. And thank you all for watching and being such a great audience. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll log back on at 8:30 p.m. IST for our next session on Season 2 of JLF's Brave New World, The Climate of History. Dipesh Chakrabarti in conversation with Navroz K. Dubash. And this session is being presented in partnership with the University of Chicago. The dual crisis of climate change and the pandemic nudges us to recalibrate the assumptions about the centrality of the human experience and fellow human hubris in the age of the Anthropocene. Professor Dipesh Chakrabarti flags urgent issues that confront the human species in a compelling conversation with Navroz K. Dubash.